The sound of the locomotive's whistle pierced the afternoon air as Emma Montgomery clutched her small leather valise with trembling hands. Through the soot-stained window of the transcontinental train, she could see Fort Yuma, Arizona Territory, sprawled along the dusty landscape like a collection of mismatched wooden boxes beneath the merciless summer sun of 1875. Her heart hammered against her ribs as the train slowed, the squealing of brakes announcing their arrival. This was supposed to be the beginning of her new life, but now that the moment had come, she couldn't move. Fort Yuma, Arizona Territory, 15-minute stop. The conductor called, moving through the passenger car. Emma remained frozen in her seat, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The letters from Mr. Jonathan Winters had seemed so kind, so promising. 6 months of correspondence had convinced her that leaving her empty life in Boston to marry a stranger in the Arizona Territory was her best chance for a future. But now, faced with the reality of stepping off this train into a new world, terror gripped her. The other passengers filed past, casting curious glances her way. The conductor approached, concern etching his weathered face. "Miss, this is Fort Yuma. Weren't you meant to disembark here?" Yes," Emma whispered, but couldn't make her legs move. The platform outside the window was filling with people, men in dusty clothes and wide-brimmed hats, women in practical frontier dresses, a few curious children. Was her future husband out there waiting? The thought only paralyzed her further. "Miss, I can't hold the train," the conductor said gently. "If you're meant to get off here." "I know, I just—" Emma clutched her valise tighter, her knuckles white against the worn brown leather. 22 years old, and she'd never been more than 10 miles from Boston before this journey. What had she been thinking? The conductor sighed sympathetically and moved on. Outside, the station master was giving the signal for departure. Emma's heart raced. She should stand up. She should gather her courage. The train lurched forward, beginning its slow departure from the Fort Yuma station. Relief and panic warred within her chest. She'd missed her stop. She'd failed before she'd even begun, but she was still safely on the train, still connected to the world she knew. Then she saw him. A tall figure running alongside the train, dust kicking up beneath his boots. His broad-shouldered silhouette moved with determined grace, gaining on the accelerating locomotive. He wore a worn cowboy hat, and even from her window she could see the intensity in his movements. He leaped onto the rear platform of the departing train with athletic ease, disappearing from her view. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Had he seen her? Did he know she was still aboard? Minutes later, the connecting door to her car opened and the cowboy stepped in. He removed his hat, revealing sun-bronzed features and eyes the color of a summer storm. His gaze swept the nearly empty car until it landed on her, and something like relief softened his expression. Without hesitation, he approached and sat beside her. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes from squinting in the sun, perhaps in a small scar that cut through his right eyebrow. "Miss Montgomery?" he asked, his voice low and gentle, like he was approaching a spooked horse. Emma nodded, unable to find her voice. "I'm Quentin Xavier," he said. "Jonathan Winters sent me to collect you." He paused, studying her pale face. "But it seems you weren't quite ready to leave the train." Her cheeks flamed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, Mr. Xavier. I don't know what came over me." "No need for apologies," he replied, settling his hat on his knee. "It's a mighty big step, coming all this way to a strange place. Are you a friend of Mr. Winters?" Emma managed to ask. Something flickered in Quentin's eyes. "I work his cattle ranch. He asked me to bring you to him since he couldn't leave the ranch himself." The train picked up speed, the desert landscape blurring outside the window. "What happens now?" Emma whispered. Quentin Xavier's mouth curved into a gentle smile. "Now we ride to the next stop at Gila Bend. We'll get off there, spend the night, and I'll arrange for transportation back to Fort Yuma tomorrow." Emma nodded, the knot of fear in her stomach loosening just slightly at his calm demeanor. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to her valise. When she nodded, he carefully took it and placed it in the overhead rack. "You're safe, Miss Montgomery. The territory might seem wild, but I promise you'll find good people here too." As the train rumbled westward, carrying them farther from Fort Yuma and her intended future, Emma stole glances at the quiet cowboy beside her. He sat with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin, his profile strong against the golden light streaming through the window. For the first time since leaving Boston, Emma felt something other than fear. She wasn't sure what it was yet, but as Quentin Xavier's gaze met hers with quiet understanding, she felt the faintest flicker of possibility. The train thundered on, carrying them across the sun-baked Arizona desert, while inside the passenger car, a hesitant conversation began between a frightened mail-order bride and the cowboy who'd climbed aboard to sit beside her. "Have you worked for Mr. Winters long?" Emma asked, finding her voice as the rhythm of the train tracks created a soothing backdrop. "Going on 5 years now," Quentin replied. His hands were large and calloused, resting easily on his thighs. "Started as a ranch hand, worked my way up to foreman last year." "He must think highly of you to send you to collect me." Something passed across Quentin's face too quickly for Emma to interpret. "Mr. Winters is particular about his affairs." "What?" Emma hesitated, twisting her gloves in her lap. "What can you tell me about him?" "His letters were kind, but he's a successful man," Quentin said carefully. "Owns the largest cattle ranch in the territory. His house is the finest in the area." Emma waited for some personal detail that might ease her anxiety, but Quentin had fallen silent, his eyes fixed on the passing landscape. "You're not telling me much, Mr. Xavier." His gaze returned to her, a hint of apology in his expression. "It's not my place to speak of my employer's character, Miss Montgomery. You'll meet him soon enough." The non-answer only heightened her anxiety. "I see," Quentin seemed to sense her disappointment. "Tell me about Boston," he offered. "I've never been further east than Kansas City." Grateful for the change of subject, Emma spoke of cobblestone streets and brick townhouses, of winter snow and spring flowers in the common. As she described her former life, she realized how colorless it had been after her parents passing, working as a seamstress for a demanding shop owner, living in a cramped boarding house with 3 other working girls, saving every penny and watching life pass her by. "So that's why you answered a stranger's advertisement for a wife?" Quentin asked when she fell silent. Emma nodded. "It seemed like my only chance for something more." She smoothed her travel-worn skirt. "I know how it must look selling myself to a man I've never met." "No judgment here," Quentin said softly. "We all do what we must to find our place in this world." The gentle acceptance in his voice brought unexpected tears to her eyes, which she blinked away hurriedly. "And what about you, Mr. Xavier? How did you find your way to Arizona territory?" A shadow crossed his face. "War has a way of uprooting a man. After Appomattox, I couldn't go back to Tennessee, too many ghosts." He flexed his right hand, and she noticed a slight stiffness to the movement. "Drifted west, found work where I could. The territory suited me, open skies, honest work." "You fought for the Confederacy?" Emma asked carefully. "I fought because my state seceded," he corrected without heat. "Learned quick enough that the cause wasn't what the politicians claimed, but that's ancient history now." He turned to look at her fully. 10 years gone, and I've made peace with most of it." The train began to slow, and the conductor passed through announcing, "Gila Bend, 30-minute stop." Quentin stood, retrieving Emma's valise from the overhead rack. "This is us, Miss Montgomery. We'll need to find lodging for the night." The reality of her situation came rushing back. She would be spending the night in a frontier town with a man she'd just met, before returning to Fort Yuma to marry another stranger. As if reading her thoughts, Quentin said, "There's a decent hotel near the station. I'll secure separate rooms and ensure your privacy is respected." Emma nodded gratefully, gathering her courage as the train shuddered to a complete stop. This time, when it was moment to disembark, she rose from her seat with only the slightest trembling in her knees. Quentin offered his arm, and she took it, drawing strength from his solid presence. Together, they stepped onto the platform of Gila Bend, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the dusty street. Emma looked up at her unexpected companion, studying his profile as he scanned the small settlement. "Ready, Miss Montgomery?" he asked, glancing down at her. Yes, Mr. Xavier, she replied, surprising herself with the truth of it. I believe I am. Gila Bend proved to be little more than a collection of buildings serving the railroad and the occasional stagecoach passing through. The hotel Quentin had mentioned was a 2-story wooden structure with a sign proclaiming it the Desert Rose Hotel. Inside, a heavy-set man with a formidable mustache looked up from behind a scarred wooden counter. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of Emma in her travel-worn but distinctly Eastern dress. Afternoon, Quentin said, removing his hat. We need 2 rooms for the night. The clerk's eyebrows rose. 2 rooms for you and the... He paused, eyeing Emma curiously. My name is Miss Emma Montgomery, she supplied with as much dignity as she could muster. Mr. Xavier is escorting me to Fort Yuma on business. I see, the clerk replied, though his tone suggested he saw something else entirely. Well, I've got 1 room left upstairs. The other was taken by a cattle buyer passing through. Emma's cheeks flamed as she realized the implication. Quentin's expression remained neutral, though she noticed his jaw tighten slightly. Is there another establishment in town? He asked. The clerk snorted. This ain't San Francisco, mister. The boarding house is full up with railroad workers. Quentin turned to Emma, speaking low. I can sleep in the stables or find a spot at the saloon. You take the room. Nonsense, Emma replied, gathering her courage. The room likely has a chair. You can have that, and I'll take the bed. When he began to protest, she added, I won't have you sleeping with horses on my account, Mr. Xavier. We're both adults. We can manage this situation with propriety. Quentin studied her face, then nodded once. As you wish, Miss Montgomery. The clerk handed over a key, accepting Quentin's payment with a knowing smirk that made Emma want to sink through the floor. As they climbed the narrow staircase, she questioned the wisdom of her decision, but the alternative, being alone in this strange place, seemed far worse. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single wooden chair near the window. A faded floral wallpaper had been applied with more enthusiasm than skill, the pattern mismatched in several places. Quentin placed her valise on the bed. I'll give you privacy to refresh yourself. There's a dining room downstairs that serves supper until 8. I'll wait for you there if you're hungry. Thank you, Emma said, suddenly uncertain. Mr. Xavier, I appreciate your kindness today. He paused at the door, his expression softening. Kindness costs nothing, Miss Montgomery, and out here it can mean the difference between survival and something worse. With a small nod, he departed, closing the door firmly behind him. Alone, Emma sank onto the bed, the events of the day washing over her in waves. She'd missed her stop, failed to meet her future husband, and now found herself in a strange town with a man she'd just met. Yet, oddly, she felt less afraid than she had on the train approaching Fort Yuma. After washing her face and hands in the basin and changing into her second-best dress, a modest blue cotton with only minimal travel wrinkles, Emma made her way downstairs. She found Quentin at a small table in the corner of the dining room, his broad shoulders making the wooden chair look delicate. He stood as she approached, pulling out her chair with an unexpected gallantry that reminded her he was a Southerner by birth. You look refreshed, he said simply as she sat. A little water can work wonders after days on a train, she replied. The dinner was basic but filling: beef stew, fresh bread, and stewed apples for dessert. As they ate, Emma found herself studying Quentin when he wasn't looking. There was a quiet strength to him, evident in the way he moved and spoke. His storm-gray eyes missed nothing, scanning the room periodically in what she suspected was a habit formed during the war. Will Mr. Winters be very angry that I missed our meeting? She asked as they finished their meal. Quentin took a moment to respond. He'll be disappointed, certainly. But these things happen in the territories. Travel is unpredictable. You're being kind, Emma said. The truth is I was too frightened to leave the train. That's hardly unpredictable, it's cowardice. Caution isn't cowardice, Quentin replied firmly. Coming across the country to marry a man you've never met takes more courage than most possess. A moment of doubt doesn't erase that. His defense warmed something inside her. You have a generous way of seeing things, Mr. Xavier. Quentin, he corrected with a small smile. If we're going to share a room tonight, we might as well use first names. Emma, then, she offered in return. As they returned to their room, Emma felt a renewed sense of awkwardness. The idea of changing into her nightclothes with only a thin screen separating her from this man seemed impossibly intimate. Quentin seemed to sense her discomfort. "I'll step out while you prepare for bed," he said. "Take all the time you need. But where will you go?" "I need to check on our transportation back to Fort Yuma tomorrow. The station master might still be about." Grateful for his consideration, Emma nodded. Once alone, she changed quickly into her nightgown and wrapper, then sat nervously on the edge of the bed, waiting. When Quentin knocked softly before entering, she appreciated the gesture. He'd removed his vest and gun belt, but otherwise remained fully dressed. Without a word, he took the wooden chair, positioned it near the window, and sat, stretching his long legs before him. "I've arranged for us to take the morning train back to Fort Yuma," he said. "It leaves at 9. "Thank you," Emma replied, suddenly exhausted as the day's emotional toll caught up with her. "Quentin, what if Mr. Winters doesn't want me now, after I failed to appear?" Quentin was silent for a long moment. Jonathan Winters is a man who knows what he wants. If he wants a wife, he'll still want you tomorrow. Something in his tone made Emma look at him sharply, but his expression revealed nothing. "You should sleep," he said softly. "Tomorrow will come soon enough." Emma slipped under the thin blanket, turning to face the wall. Despite her exhaustion, sleep remained elusive as she listened to Quentin's steady breathing from across the room. Eventually, the rhythm lulled her into a fitful slumber. She dreamed of Boston, of her parents' funeral, of the cold emptiness of the boarding house. Then the dream shifted, and she was on the train again, but this time it was rushing toward something terrible, and she couldn't get off, couldn't escape. Emma. A gentle hand on her shoulder pulled her from the nightmare. "You're dreaming." She blinked in the darkness, Quentin's concerned face coming into focus above her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Did I wake you?" "I wasn't sleeping," he admitted, moving back to his chair once he saw she was fully awake. In the moonlight streaming through the window, his profile looked carved from stone. "You often have trouble sleeping?" she asked. "Since the war," he confirmed. "Some nights are better than others." Emma sat up, pulling her wrapper more tightly around her. "What was it like? The war?" Quentin was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, each word carefully chosen. "It was the worst thing I've ever experienced. And sometimes, God help me, I miss it." He turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. Not the killing or dying, but the clarity, knowing exactly what you were supposed to do each day, knowing who stood with you. And now the world is full of gray areas. "Right and wrong aren't so clear anymore," he sighed softly. "Go back to sleep, Emma. Morning comes early in the desert," but Emma found she wasn't ready to return to her dreams. "Tell me about the ranch," she said instead. "What will my life be like there?" Something like pain flickered across his face, quickly masked. "The Triple W is a fine spread. The main house sits on a hill overlooking the valley. From the porch, you can see for miles cattle grazing, mountains in the distance." "And what about the people? Will there be other women nearby?" "Mrs. Garrison is the housekeeper. She's a widow, about 50. There's a cook, Hector, who came up from Mexico. The nearest neighbor with a family is about 5 miles east. The Pattersons have 2 young daughters." He hesitated. "It's not Boston. Society is limited." Emma nodded, trying to imagine this new life. "And Mr. Winters, what is he like? As a man, I mean, not as a rancher." Quentin stood abruptly, moving to the window. With his back to her, he said, "Jonathan Winters is successful by any measure. He built his ranch from nothing. He's respected in the territory." "You keep saying what he has, not who he is," Emma observed quietly. Quentin's shoulders tensed. "It's not my place to speak of your employer's character." "Yes, you said that before." Emma studied his rigid posture. "But you're bringing me to marry him. Surely you have some opinion about whether he'll make a good husband." When Quentin turned, his expression was carefully controlled. "Emma, you should get some rest. We have an early start tomorrow." The deliberate change of subject wasn't lost on her, and a chill that had nothing to do with the night air settled in her stomach. What wasn't he telling her about Jonathan Winters? She lay back down, more unsettled than before. "Good night, Quentin." "Good night, Emma," he replied softly. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the window and the distant sound of a rooster announcing the dawn. Emma opened her eyes to find Quentin already awake, standing by the window. He'd clearly been up for some time, his clothes neatly arranged and his hair damp from washing. "Good morning," she said, sitting up and smoothing her tangled hair. He turned, offering a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Morning, I've brought you some hot water for washing. It's behind the screen." Emma thanked him and hurried through her morning ablutions, changing into her last clean dress, a green cotton with white piping that had been her best travel outfit. When she emerged, Quentin was waiting patiently, her valise already packed. "You're very efficient," she observed. "Force of habit," he replied. "Breakfast is waiting downstairs if you're hungry." Over a meal of eggs, bacon, and surprisingly good biscuits, Emma found herself studying Quentin more intently. Something had changed between them overnight. He seemed more distant, his manner more formal, as if he was rebuilding walls that had momentarily lowered during their late-night conversation. "Is everything all right?" she finally asked as they finished eating. Quentin met her gaze, then looked away, just thinking about the journey ahead. They walked to the train station in silence, the morning already warming as the sun climbed higher. The platform was busy with travelers and freight being loaded, but Emma barely noticed, too preoccupied with the growing unease in her chest. As they waited for the train, she gathered her courage. "Quentin, before we return to Fort Yuma, I need you to be honest with me. Is there something I should know about Mr. Winters? Something you're not telling me?" Quentin's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the tanned skin. For a long moment he stared at the tracks, and Emma thought he might refuse to answer again. "Jonathan Winters is a hard man," he finally said, his voice so low she had to lean closer to hear him. "He's built an empire through determination and ruthlessness. Those qualities made him successful, but they don't make him." He trailed off. "Kind," Emma supplied. Quentin's eyes met hers, troubled. "He's buried 2 wives already. The first died in childbirth. The second..." He hesitated. "There was an accident. She fell down the stairs." A chill ran through Emma despite the morning heat. "Are you saying he..." "I'm not saying anything," Quentin cut her off, then softened his tone. "I don't know what happened. All I know is that Jonathan Winters gets what he wants, and he doesn't take kindly to disappointment." The train whistle sounded in the distance, announcing its approach. Emma's heart raced as she processed Quentin's words and the warning behind them. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked. "Because you asked," he said simply. "And because you deserve to know what you're walking into." The train rounded the bend, steam billowing as it approached the station. Emma stared at it, feeling the same paralyzing fear that had gripped her in Fort Yuma. "I can't go," she whispered. "I can't marry him." Quentin's expression showed a complex mix of emotions: relief, concern, and something deeper she couldn't name. "If you get on that train, I can't protect you from what happens in Fort Yuma. And if I don't," his eyes held hers, "then I'll help you however I can." The train was slowing now, the screech of brakes filling the air. Emma looked at it, then back at Quentin, a man she'd known for less than a day but who had shown her more consideration than anyone had in years. "I need to go east," she said decisively. "Back to somewhere I can start over. Not Boston, but maybe St. Louis or Chicago." Quentin nodded, something like admiration in his eyes. "The eastbound train comes through tomorrow morning." "What about Mr. Winters? Won't he be angry with you for failing to bring me back?" A grim smile touched Quentin's lips. "Let me worry about Jonathan Winters." As the westbound train pulled into the station, they stepped back, letting other passengers board. The conductor looked at them questioningly. "Change of plans," Quentin explained. "We'll be catching tomorrow's eastbound instead." Once the train departed, they stood on the empty platform, the reality of Emma's decision settling between them. "I have a friend in town," Quentin said. "A widow who runs the millinery shop. She might let you stay with her tonight. It would be more proper than sharing a room again." Emma nodded, grateful for his thoughtfulness. "Thank you, Quentin, for everything." His expression softened. You're making the right choice, Emma. Jonathan Winters is not a man who deserves someone like you." As they walked toward the town's small business district, Emma felt both terrified and exhilarated by her decision. She had come west to find a husband, and instead found herself starting over again, this time with even less than before. Yet, glancing at the quiet cowboy beside her, she couldn't help but feel that somehow she'd gained something far more valuable than she'd lost. Mrs. Abigail Peterson, the widow who owned Gila Bend's only millinery shop, proved to be a blessing in disguise. A plump, cheerful woman in her 50s with shrewd eyes and a kind smile, she welcomed Emma into her home above the shop with genuine warmth. "Any friend of Quentin Xavier's is welcome here," she declared, showing Emma to a small but tidy guest room. "That man saved my Patrick's life when bandits tried to rob our freight wagon 2 years ago." Emma glanced at Quentin, who looked uncomfortable with the praise. "It was nothing, Abigail. Patrick would have done the same for me." "Nonsense," Mrs. Peterson said firmly. "Taking a bullet is never nothing." She turned to Emma. "He never mentioned that part, did he? Typical men and their false modesty." As Mrs. Peterson bustled off to prepare tea, Emma raised an eyebrow at Quentin. "You were shot," he shrugged, the movement slightly stiff on his right side. "It wasn't serious. Is that why your right hand is a little stiff?" "Not from the war." Surprise flashed across his face. "You're observant." "I notice things about people who matter," she replied without thinking, then blushed at her own boldness. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "The bullet shattered some bones in my shoulder. It healed well enough, but some movements are still complicated." Before Emma could respond, Mrs. Peterson returned with tea and an announcement. "I've just had a wonderful thought. I'm in desperate need of help in the shop. Millinery season is upon us, and I simply can't keep up with the orders." She looked at Emma hopefully. "Quentin mentioned you're a skilled seamstress. Would you consider staying on for a while? I can offer room and board plus a small wage." Emma blinked, stunned by the unexpected offer. "But I was planning to go east tomorrow." Mrs. Peterson waved a dismissive hand. "East, west, the direction doesn't matter, dear. It's where you can make a life that counts, and Gila Bend is growing. The railroad brings new people through every day." She lowered her voice confidentially. "Including eligible young men without the temperament of a rattlesnake." Quentin cleared his throat. "Abigail." "Oh, hush, Quentin. I know you can't speak ill of your employer, but we all know what Jonathan Winters is like." Mrs. Peterson patted Emma's hand. "You've had a lucky escape, my dear." Emma looked from Mrs. Peterson's kind face to Quentin's carefully neutral one. The offer was tempting a chance to catch her breath, earn some money, and consider her next steps without rushing back east in panic. "Could I think about it?" she asked. "Of course, sleep on it." "The eastbound train doesn't leave until 10 tomorrow." Mrs. Peterson rose. "Now I must get back to the shop. Quentin, you're welcome to stay for supper, of course." After she bustled out, Emma and Quentin sat in awkward silence. "She's very kind," Emma finally said. "Abigail has a big heart," Quentin agreed, "and she's a good businesswoman. If she says she needs help, she means it. Would you?" Emma hesitated, uncertain how to phrase her question. "Would you think less of me if I stayed, instead of going east?" Quentin's expression softened. "Emma, your courage has only increased in my estimation since I met you. First you traveled across the country alone, then you had the wisdom to recognize a bad situation and the strength to walk away from it." He leaned forward slightly. "Whether you go east or stay here doesn't change that." His words settled something within her. "Then I think I might stay, at least for a little while." Quentin nodded, but she noticed a shadow cross his face. "That's good. You don't sound convinced." He stood, moving to the window that overlooked the dusty main street. "Jonathan Winters will expect me back tomorrow, with or without you." The implication hung in the air between them. "Will you be in danger?" Emma asked quietly. Quentin's shoulders straightened. "I can handle Jonathan Winters. You're going to quit," she realized, "because of me." He turned, his expression resolute. "It's been coming for a while. This just hastened the decision." "What will you do?" "There's always work for a capable ranch hand." He gave her a reassuring smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Don't worry about me, Emma." But as they shared a simple supper with Mrs. Peterson that evening, Emma found herself doing exactly that. She'd known Quentin Xavier for barely a day, yet the thought of him returning to confront a man like Jonathan Winters, a man who might have been responsible for his wife's death, filled her with dread. Later, as she prepared for bed in the guest room, a soft knock came at her door. Opening it, she found Quentin standing in the hallway, hat in hand. "I wanted to say goodbye," he said quietly. "I'll be leaving before dawn to catch the westbound freight train." "So soon?" Emma couldn't keep the disappointment from her voice. Better to face Winters directly than let him stew. Quentin's expression was carefully controlled. "I wanted to make sure you'll be all right." "I'll be fine," Emma assured him, though the words felt hollow. "Mrs. Peterson is kind and the work sounds interesting." Quentin nodded, his eyes searching her face as if memorizing it. "You're going to do well here, Emma Montgomery. You have a strength in you that this territory respects." "Thank you for everything," she said, suddenly fighting tears. "For following me onto that train, for seeing me." Something in his expression shifted, a crack in his careful composure. "I saw you the moment you stepped onto that platform in Fort Yuma," he admitted softly. "Standing there in your Eastern dress, looking like a ray of sunlight in the dust." He cleared his throat. "Be well, Emma." Before she could respond, he placed his hat on his head with a nod and turned to go. "Quentin," she called after him. When he paused, she said, "Be careful with Mr. Winters." A grim smile touched his lips. "Always, Em." Emma watched him descend the stairs, his tall figure disappearing from view. Only then did she close her door, leaning against it as unexpected tears slid down her cheeks. She'd come west seeking a husband and found herself alone again, yet somehow, in the span of a day, her heart had attached itself to a quiet cowboy with storm-gray eyes. The next morning, Emma woke to the sounds of the shop opening below. Dressing quickly in her green travel dress, now considerably more wrinkled, she went downstairs to find Mrs. Peterson arranging colorful hat decorations. "Ah, there you are, my dear. Did you sleep well?" "Have you thought about my offer?" Emma smiled at the older woman's enthusiasm. "I did, and I'd like to accept if it's still available." Mrs. Peterson clapped her hands in delight. "Wonderful, we'll start your training today. I have 3 orders that need finishing by next week." The work proved to be exactly what Emma needed, detailed enough to require concentration, but familiar enough to be comforting. Mrs. Peterson was an excellent teacher, showing Emma the particular techniques required for millinery that differed from regular dressmaking. Days passed, settling into a pleasant rhythm. Emma wrote to her former landlady in Boston, requesting that her few remaining possessions be sent to Gila Bend. She began to recognize the townspeople, who welcomed her with the easy friendliness of a frontier community. Yet despite the growing comfort of her new life, Emma found herself watching each arriving train from the west, hoping for a glimpse of a tall figure in a worn cowboy hat. 2 weeks passed with no word from Quentin, and her worry grew. "You're fretting again, Mrs. Peterson observed one afternoon as they worked on a particularly elaborate bonnet. "Your stitches get tighter when you're worried," Emma sighed, setting aside her work. "I'm concerned about Mr. Xavier. It's been 2 weeks since he returned to Fort Yuma, Mrs. Peterson's expression softened with understanding. "You care for him?" It wasn't a question, but Emma nodded anyway. "It's foolish, I know. We barely spent a day together." "The heart doesn't measure time, dear. It measures connection," the older woman smiled. "And Quentin Xavier is a man worth caring about." "Do you think something's happened to him?" Emma asked, voicing the fear that had been growing inside her. "That man has survived worse than Jonathan Winters," Mrs. Peterson assured her. "But if you're truly worried, there's a freight driver coming through tomorrow who regularly stops at the Triple W Ranch. I could ask him for news." Emma nodded gratefully. "I'd appreciate that." The next day passed with agonizing slowness as Emma waited for the freight driver's arrival. When Mrs. Peterson finally came upstairs after speaking with him, her expression was grave. "What is it?" Emma asked, her heart sinking. "Is Quentin hurt?" "Not hurt, dear, but there's been trouble. According to Hank, Quentin returned to the ranch and gave his notice." "Winters was furious, accused him of all manner of things, including stealing you away." Mrs. Peterson sat heavily in a chair. "They had a terrible row, and Winters fired him on the spot, refusing to pay his back wages." Quentin left with just his horse and what he could carry. Where did he go? Emma asked, her throat tight with worry. Hank didn't know. No one's seen him since he rode out 3 days after returning. Mrs. Peterson patted Emma's hand. Don't fret too much. Quentin knows this territory better than most. He's likely found work at another ranch. But Emma couldn't shake her concern, especially knowing that Quentin had lost his position and possibly his reputation with other ranchers because of her. That night, unable to sleep, she sat by her window watching the quiet street below, illuminated by a nearly full moon. A movement caught her eye, a lone rider moving slowly down the main street. There was something familiar about the set of his shoulders, the way he sat his horse. Heart-pounding, Emma threw a shawl over her nightdress and hurried downstairs, unlocking the shop's front door just as the rider was passing. "Quentin," she called softly. The rider reined in his horse, turning toward her voice. When he removed his hat, the moonlight revealed the face she'd been hoping to see for 2 weeks. "Emma," Quentin said, his voice rough with surprise. "You're still here?" "I stayed," she confirmed, suddenly conscious of her inappropriate attire. "Mrs. Peterson offered me work." He dismounted, approaching slowly as if uncertain of his welcome. In the moonlight, she could see new lines of fatigue on his face, and his clothes were dusty from the trail. "I heard about what happened with Mr. Winters," she said. "I'm so sorry." Quentin shook his head. "Don't be." It was time to move on. He hesitated, then asked, "How are you finding Gila Bend? It's growing on me," Emma replied, drinking in the sight of him. "Quentin, where have you been? Mrs. Peterson's friend said no one had seen you." "I went north for a while, needed to think." He glanced at his horse, then back at her. "I should let you get back inside. It's late and you're not dressed for the night air." "Where are you staying?" she asked, unwilling to let him disappear again. "Nowhere yet, just rode in." Emma made a quick decision. "There's a small stable behind the shop. Your horse can rest there and we have a sofa in the parlor." When he began to protest, she added, "Please, Quentin, it's the least I can do after everything." After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. "Just for tonight, I'll be on my way tomorrow." While Quentin settled his horse, Emma hurried inside to make up the sofa with spare blankets. She was just finishing when he entered, looking even more exhausted in the lamplight. "There's water in the kitchen if you'd like to wash," she offered, suddenly shy. "Thank you," he said simply. As he moved toward the kitchen, Emma called after him, "Quentin, I'm glad you came back." He paused, turning to look at her with an expression that made her heart skip. "So am I, Emma, so am I." The next morning, Emma woke early, eager to speak with Quentin before the shop opened. She found him already awake, his blankets neatly folded on the sofa. "Good morning," she said, taking in his appearance in the clear light of day. He looked better after a night's rest, though still leaner than she remembered. "Morning," he replied, standing as she entered. "I appreciate the lodging." "You're welcome to stay longer," Emma offered. "Mrs. Peterson won't mind. She thinks very highly of you." Quentin shook his head. "I've imposed enough. Besides, I need to find work." "Have you thought about what you'll do next?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she recognized as uncertainty. "I've been offered a position with the Army as a scout. The pay is decent, and it would get me away from cattle ranching for a while." Emma's heart sank at the thought of him leaving again, possibly for months at a time. "Is that what you want, to be a scout?" "One doesn't factor much into it," he replied pragmatically. "It's work, and I need that more than what I want." Before Emma could respond, Mrs. Peterson appeared, her eyes widening at the sight of Quentin. "Well, look what the night brought in." "Quentin Xavier, as I live and breathe." "Mrs. Peterson," Quentin greeted her with a respectful nod. "I apologize for the imposition." "Nonsense, you're always welcome here." She studied him with shrewd eyes. "You're looking for work, I expect." "Yes, madam." "Thought I might check with the Army about a scouting position." Mrs. Peterson frowned. "Scouting is dangerous work, and you'd be gone for months at a time." She glanced at Emma, then back to Quentin. "I have a better proposal. My late husband's brother owns a freight business in Tucson. He's looking for someone reliable to manage his Gila Bend office. The work isn't as exciting as scouting, but it's steady and respectable." Quentin looked surprised by the offer. "I don't have experience with freight management." But you have experience with people, with the territory, and with doing honest work, Mrs. Peterson countered. Everything else can be learned. Emma watched Quentin's face as he considered the unexpected opportunity. If he accepted, he would be staying in Gila Bend. The thought made her heart race. It's a generous offer, Quentin said carefully. I'd need to know more details before deciding. Of course, I'll write to Charles today. In the meantime, you'll stay with us, Mrs. Peterson's tone brooked no argument. Now I must open the shop. Emma, perhaps you could show Quentin around town today, introduce him to people he should know if he's to consider staying. With that, she bustled off, leaving Emma and Quentin alone again. She's a force of nature, Quentin observed with a small smile. She is, Emma agreed, but she means well. She hesitated, then asked, would you really consider staying in Gila Bend? Quentin's eyes met hers, something unguarded in his expression. I might, if there was enough reason to. The weight of his gaze made Emma's cheeks warm. Well, the freight business sounds promising. A hint of amusement touched his lips. Yes, the freight business is certainly one consideration. The day passed pleasantly as Emma showed Quentin around Gila Bend. The town was small but growing rapidly due to the railroad, with new businesses opening monthly. They visited the general store, the bank, and the small church, where Emma introduced Quentin to people she'd met during her 2 weeks in town. You've made friends quickly, he observed as they walked back toward the millinery shop. People here are kind, Emma replied, less formal than in Boston, and they respect hard work. It suits you, Quentin said. This place, you seem more at ease than you were on the train. Emma smiled, realizing the truth of his words. I am. For the first time in years, I feel like I'm building something of my own, not just surviving. As they approached the shop, Quentin stopped suddenly, his expression turning serious. Emma, I should tell you something about Jonathan Winters. Emma's smile faded. What is it? He's not giving up on finding you. Before I left, he was talking about hiring men to track you down. Quentin's voice was low, urgent. He considers you his property paid for with those train tickets and the correspondence. Fear flickered through Emma's chest. Can he do that? Force me to marry him, legally? No, but men like Winters don't always concern themselves with legalities. Quentin's jaw tightened. I wanted you to know so you can be careful. Thank you for telling me, Emma said, trying to keep her voice steady. Do you think he knows I'm here? Not yet, but Gila Bend is the logical place to start looking. Quentin hesitated, then added, if I take this freight position, I can help protect you. The offer warmed Emma despite her fear. I can't ask you to stay just for that. Quentin's expression softened. That's not the only reason I'm considering it, Emma. Before she could ask what he meant, the shop door opened and Mrs. Peterson emerged, waving an envelope. A letter from Charles. He's thrilled at the prospect of having Quentin manage the office. He can start next week. As Mrs. Peterson detailed the salary and responsibilities, Emma watched Quentin's face, trying to gauge his reaction. He asked practical questions, his expression thoughtful. It's a fair offer, he finally said. If you're certain your brother-in-law wants to hire a man he's never met. Charles trusts my judgment, Mrs. Peterson said firmly, and I judge you to be exactly what he needs. She gave them both a meaningful look. What Gila Bend needs, in fact. That evening, after the shop closed, the three of them shared a celebratory supper to mark Quentin's new position. Mrs. Peterson told stories of her late husband's adventures in the freight business, keeping them entertained with tales of bandits, flash floods, and stubborn mules. As they finished their meal, she announced, I'm absolutely exhausted. These old bones need rest. You two young people enjoy the evening. Perhaps a walk would be nice. The moon is nearly full. With that transparent excuse, she retired upstairs, leaving Emma and Quentin alone in the small parlor. Subtle, isn't she? Quentin remarked, a hint of amusement in his voice. Emma laughed softly, about as subtle as a charging buffalo. She hesitated, then suggested, but a walk does sound nice if you'd like to join me. Gila Bend was quiet in the evening, most businesses closed except for the saloon at the end of the street. They walked slowly, maintaining a proper distance between them despite the growing intimacy of their conversation. Tell me something I don't know about you, Emma said as they passed the darkened general store. Quentin considered the request. I wanted to be a schoolteacher before the war, he admitted. I had a year of college before Tennessee seceded and everything changed. You'd make a good teacher, Emma said, surprised but pleased by this glimpse of a different Quentin. What about you? He asked. What dreams did Boston Emma harbor? The question made her pause. I never really had the luxury of dreams, she confessed. After my parents died, it was all about survival. Each day, each week, just getting by. Quentin's expression softened with understanding. And now, Emma looked up at the star-filled desert sky, considering, now I think I want to build something lasting, a business, perhaps a home. She glanced at him, then quickly away. A life that's mine, not just existing in the margins of someone else's story. That's a good dream, Quentin said quietly, one worth protecting. They had reached the edge of town where the buildings gave way to open desert. In the moonlight, the landscape looked almost magical silver sand, dark silhouettes of cacti, distant mountains etched against the horizon. It's beautiful here, Emma murmured. In a completely different way than Boston. The territory grows on you, Quentin agreed, standing beside her to gaze at the view. Raw and honest, no pretense. Emma turned to look at him, his profile strong in the moonlight. Like you, his eyes met hers, surprise and something deeper in their gray depths. Emma. I'm glad you're staying, she said softly. Not just because of Jonathan Winters, because she hesitated, then gathered her courage. Because in one day you showed me more kindness and respect than most people have in my entire life, and I'd like the chance to know you better. Quentin's expression softened, a vulnerability there she hadn't seen before. I'd like that too, very much. As they stood together under the vast desert sky, Emma felt something shift between them, a recognition of possibilities, of futures not yet written but suddenly imaginable. The weeks that followed settled into a pleasant rhythm. Quentin began his position at the freight office, quickly proving his worth by reorganizing the operation for greater efficiency. Emma continued her work at the millinery shop, her skills improving daily under Mrs. Peterson's tutelage. They saw each other often, supper most evenings, walks on Sundays after church, occasional picnics when both had a free afternoon. Their friendship deepened, comfortable yet charged with an unspoken awareness that it might become something more. Quentin found lodging at the boarding house 2 streets over, though he still visited the shop daily, often bringing lunch for Emma and Mrs. Peterson. The townspeople quickly accepted him as part of the community, respecting his quiet competence and fair dealings. One evening in late October, nearly 2 months after Quentin's return to Gila Bend, he invited Emma to supper at the hotel's dining room, their first formal outing together. You look beautiful, he said when she descended the shop stairs in her best dress, a blue silk she'd remade from one of Mrs. Peterson's older gowns. Thank you, Emma replied, noting with pleasure that he'd worn his good suit, the one he usually reserved for church. You're quite handsome yourself. The hotel dining room had been decorated for the harvest season, with dried cornstalks and pumpkins creating a festive atmosphere. As they were seated at a table with a crisp white cloth, a rarity in Gila Bend, Emma noticed several approving glances from other diners. I believe we're the subject of town speculation, she murmured, hiding a smile behind her menu. Small towns, Quentin replied with a rueful shake of his head, though in this case they might not be entirely wrong to speculate. Emma looked up, her heart skipping at his words and the intent expression on his face. Before she could respond, however, a commotion at the dining room entrance drew their attention. 3 men had entered, trail dusty and hard-faced, scanning the room with calculating eyes. Emma's breath caught as the tallest one's gaze landed on their table, a slow smile spreading across his face. Xavier, the man called, striding toward them. Fancy meeting you here. Quentin stood, positioning himself slightly in front of Emma. Dawson, what brings you to Gila Bend? Work, Dawson replied, his eyes sliding to Emma. This the Montgomery woman? Emma felt the blood drain from her face. Quentin's posture stiffened, his hand moving slightly toward where his gun would normally be, though he wasn't wearing it for their dinner. Your business is with me, not the lady, Quentin said, his voice dangerously quiet. Dawson smirked. Actually, our business is with her. Mr. Winters is mighty eager to meet his intended bride. The other diners had fallen silent, watching the confrontation with wary interest. Miss Montgomery isn't going anywhere, Quentin stated firmly. She's no man's property. Paid for train tickets say different, Dawson countered. But we don't need to make a scene. Just come with us quiet like, miss, and everything will be fine. Emma stood, her legs trembling but her voice steady. I will not be going anywhere with you, sir. Please leave us to our meal. Dawson's expression hardened. It wasn't a request. He nodded to his companions, who spread out slightly, hands hovering near their weapons. The hotel owner appeared, a shotgun in his hands. Is there a problem here, Mr. Xavier? These men were just leaving, Quentin replied, not taking his eyes off Dawson. A tense silence stretched for several heartbeats before Dawson finally shrugged. Another time, then. But Winters ain't a patient man. With a mock tip of his hat toward Emma, he backed away, his companions following. Only after they'd left did Emma realize she'd been holding her breath. She sank back into her chair, legs suddenly weak. Are you all right? Quentin asked softly, reclaiming his seat. He found me, she whispered. How did he find me? Word travels, Quentin said grimly. I was afraid of this. He reached across the table, taking her hand. Emma, I won't let them take you anywhere, I promise. The hotel owner approached their table. Everything okay, folks? Should I send for the sheriff? Yes, Quentin decided. Those men might cause trouble, and Mr. Peterson, I'd appreciate if you'd make sure Miss Montgomery gets safely back to the millinery after our meal. Of course, the man agreed, hurrying off. Their romantic dinner ruined, Emma and Quentin tried to maintain a normal conversation, but the specter of Jonathan Winters's men hung over them. What will they do next? Emma asked as they finished their barely touched dessert. They'll wait, watch for an opportunity, Quentin replied honestly. Men like that don't give up easily, especially when they're being paid well. What should we do? Quentin's expression was resolute. We need to resolve this permanently. As long as Winters believes he has a claim on you, he'll keep sending men. How do we stop him? I'm not sure yet, Quentin admitted, but I'll think of something. As promised, Mr. Peterson escorted them back to the millinery shop after dinner. Quentin explained the situation to Mrs. Peterson, whose normally cheerful expression turned fierce. That horrible man, she exclaimed. As if a woman could be bought and sold like cattle, she turned to Emma. You'll stay inside as much as possible until this is resolved, and I'll speak to Reverend Michaels tomorrow. He has connections with the territorial governor. That night, Emma found sleep elusive, her mind racing with worry. What if Winters's men managed to take her? What if Quentin was hurt trying to protect her? The next morning brought another worry. Quentin hadn't appeared for his usual breakfast visit. By mid-morning, Emma was frantic enough to send a boy from the general store to check the freight office. He returned with troubling news. Mr. Xavier ain't been in today, Miss Montgomery. His assistant says he left a note saying he had urgent business. What business? Emma asked, dread pooling in her stomach. The boy shrugged. Didn't say, miss, just that he'd be back soon as he could. All day, Emma watched the door, hoping for Quentin's tall figure to appear. By closing time, with still no word, her worry had turned to certainty he'd gone to confront Jonathan Winters. He's going to get himself killed, she told Mrs. Peterson that evening, pacing the small parlor. All because of me. Quentin Xavier is not a man to act rashly, Mrs. Peterson assured her, though concern lined her face. He must have a plan. What plan could possibly work against a man like Winters? Emma asked. Quentin said himself that Winters is ruthless, Mrs. Peterson had no answer for that. 3 days passed with no word from Quentin. Emma went through the motions of her work, her heart growing heavier with each passing hour. Winters's men remained in town, occasionally walking past the shop with deliberate slowness, a clear reminder of their presence. On the 4th morning, Emma was arranging a display in the shop window when the stagecoach arrived. Among the disembarking passengers was a distinguished-looking gentleman in an expensive suit, accompanied by a younger man carrying a leather portfolio. To her surprise, they approached the millinery shop, entering with a ring of the small bell above the door. Good morning, Emma greeted them automatically. "How may I help you, Miss Emma Montgomery?" the older man inquired, removing his hat. Emma's heart raced, but she kept her composure. "Yes, that's me. Judge William Harrington," the man introduced himself. "This is my clerk, Mr. Phillips. We've come from Tucson on a matter of some importance." Mrs. Peterson emerged from the back room, her expression wary. "Judge Harrington, this is an unexpected honor." The judge nodded politely to her. "Mrs. Peterson, I wonder if we might speak privately with Miss Montgomery. Anything you have to say to her can be said in front of me," Mrs. Peterson declared firmly. The judge smiled slightly. "Very well. Miss Montgomery, I'm here regarding the matter of one Jonathan Winters and his claim on your person." Emma's hand flew to her throat. "Has something happened? Is Quentin Mr. Xavier all right?" "Mr. Xavier is fine," the judge assured her. "In fact, it was at his insistence that I traveled here." He turned to his clerk. "The papers, please, Mr. Phillips." The young man opened his portfolio, extracting several official-looking documents. "Miss Montgomery, Mr. Xavier has presented evidence to the territorial court that Jonathan Winters has been engaged in numerous illegal activities, including land theft, intimidation, and suspected involvement in the death of his second wife." The judge's expression was grave. "After investigation, we've found sufficient cause to issue warrants for Mr. Winters's arrest." "Arrest?" Emma repeated, stunned. "Yes, he was taken into custody yesterday. His assets have been frozen pending trial." The judge handed her one of the papers. "This is an official declaration that any claimed contract between you and Mr. Winters is null and void due to his fraudulent representations and criminal activity." Emma stared at the document, her hands shaking. "He's really been arrested. He can't send more men after me." "The men in town have also been detained," the judge confirmed. "Mr. Xavier was most thorough in his evidence gathering." Mrs. Peterson let out a joyful laugh. "That clever man, always so quiet about his plans." "Where is Quentin now?" Emma asked, hardly daring to hope. "He remained in Tucson to give further testimony," the judge explained. "But he asked me to deliver a personal message as well." He reached into his coat pocket, extracting a folded letter which he handed to Emma. With trembling fingers, she opened it, recognizing Quentin's neat, precise handwriting. "Emma, by the time you read this, Judge Harrington will have explained the situation with Winters. I apologize for leaving without explanation, but I couldn't risk Winters learning of my plan. For months, I've been gathering evidence of his crimes, hoping someday to bring him to justice. Your situation gave me the final push to act. I'll return to Gila Bend as soon as my testimony is complete, hopefully within the week. There's much I want to say to you, but some words are better spoken in person than written on paper. Until then, know that you are free. Your future belongs to you alone as it should. Yours, Quentin." Emma pressed the letter to her heart, tears of relief and joy threatening to spill. "Miss Montgomery," Judge Harrington said gently, "Mr. Xavier spoke very highly of you. It's rare to see a man so determined to ensure a lady's well-being and freedom." "He's a rare man," Emma replied softly. "Indeed," the judge smiled. "Well, our business here is concluded. We'll return to Tucson tomorrow. Mr. Xavier asked that I reassure you he'll be back as soon as possible." After the judge and his clerk departed, Mrs. Peterson pulled Emma into a tight hug. "It's over, my dear. You're truly free now." "Thanks to Quentin," Emma said, still holding his letter. Mrs. Peterson's eyes twinkled. "That man didn't risk his life just from a sense of justice, Emma. Surely you know that." Emma blushed, hope blooming in her chest. "I've been afraid to presume." "Well, stop being afraid," Mrs. Peterson said firmly. "Some things are as plain as day, even to an old woman's eyes." The next 6 days were the longest of Emma's life. She threw herself into her work, creating her finest hat designs yet, but her mind constantly drifted to Quentin. Each arriving train or stagecoach brought a rush of anticipation, followed by disappointment. On the 7th day after the judge's visit, Emma was working alone in the shop, Mrs. Peterson having gone to visit a friend. The bell above the door jingled, and she looked up with her practiced shopkeeper's smile. The smile froze, then transformed into something radiant as Quentin Xavier stepped into the millinery shop. He looked tired but whole, his eyes immediately finding hers across the room. "You're back," Emma breathed, setting aside the bonnet she'd been trimming. "I'm back," he confirmed, removing his hat. He looked uncertain for perhaps the first time since she'd met him. "I got here as quickly as I could." Emma moved from behind the counter, closing the distance between them with quick steps. Without hesitation, she threw her arms around him, propriety forgotten in the joy of seeing him safe. Quentin's arms encircled her, holding her close as if she were something precious. "I was worried you might be angry," he murmured into her hair. Emma pulled back just enough to look at his face. "Angry? You risked everything to help me. How could I be anything but grateful?" "I should have told you my plan," he said, "but Winters had spies everywhere. I couldn't risk it." "I understand," Emma smiled up at him. "The judge explained everything. Jonathan Winters can't hurt anyone now." Quentin nodded, his expression serious. "The evidence was overwhelming once the authorities actually looked. He'll likely spend the rest of his life in prison." "Good," Emma said firmly, then softened. "Your letter said you had things to say to me, things better spoken than written." A hint of color touched Quentin's cheeks, but his gaze remained steady. "I do." He took a breath, then continued, "Emma Montgomery, I've known since the moment I saw you on that train platform that you were someone special. Getting to know you these past months has only confirmed that." Emma's heart pounded as he took her hands in his. "I know it hasn't been long," Quentin continued, "and I know you came west seeking independence, not another proposal, but I find I can't imagine my life without you in it." His voice deepened with emotion. "I love you, Emma. Not as something to possess or control, but as an equal a partner I want to build a life with." Tears of joy welled in Emma's eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I started falling in love with you the moment you climbed onto that train and sat beside me when I was too afraid to move." Quentin's smile was like the sunrise. "I don't want to rush you. We can take as much time as you need." "I don't need more time," Emma interrupted with newfound boldness. "I know what I want, Quentin Xavier. I want a life with you." His eyes darkened with emotion as he drew her closer. "May I kiss you, Emma?" In answer, she rose on her tiptoes, meeting his lips with her own. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with the promise of all they might become together. When they finally parted, both breathless, Emma knew with absolute certainty that she'd found her home not in a place, but in a person. "Well, it's about time." Mrs. Peterson's voice came from the doorway, where she stood beaming at them. "I was beginning to think I'd need to lock you two in the storeroom together." Quentin laughed, keeping one arm around Emma's waist. "Your patience has been rewarded, Mrs. Peterson." "Indeed it has," the older woman agreed, wiping a suspicious moisture from her eyes. "Now, when shall we plan the wedding?" 3 months later, on a crisp January morning in 1876, Emma Montgomery became Emma Xavier in a simple ceremony at Gila Bend's small church. The entire town turned out to witness the union of the milliner's apprentice and the freight office manager, a couple whose story had already become something of a local legend. As they exchanged vows, Emma thought of the frightened woman she'd been on that train, too afraid to step into the unknown. How different her life would have been if Quentin hadn't climbed aboard and sat beside her that day. Their first home was a small but cozy house near the edge of town, close enough to both their workplaces, but with a view of the desert that Quentin loved. Emma continued working with Mrs. Peterson, gradually taking on more responsibility in the shop, while Quentin expanded the freight business to include a stagecoach line connecting Gila Bend to Tucson. A year later, their joy multiplied with the birth of their first child, a son they named James after Emma's father. Mrs. Peterson appointed herself honorary grandmother, spoiling the boy shamelessly and declaring him the spitting image of his father. Thank the Lord. On their second anniversary, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the desert in gold and crimson, Quentin took Emma's hand in his. "Are you happy?" he asked, his storm-gray eyes searching hers. Emma smiled, leaning against his shoulder. Their second child, a daughter, was due in the spring. The millinery shop was flourishing under her partial ownership, and the man beside her loved her with a steadfast devotion that still took her breath away. Happier than I ever dreamed possible, she answered truthfully. Are you? Beyond measure, Quentin replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. Sometimes I think about how close we came to missing this, if you hadn't been afraid to leave that train, if you hadn't been brave enough to climb aboard, Emma added. They sat in comfortable silence as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. From inside came the sound of their son's laughter as Mrs. Peterson, who was babysitting for their anniversary, told him a story. I never believed in fate, Quentin said softly, until a mail-order bride was too afraid to leave a train and I climbed aboard to sit beside her. Emma turned her face to his, her eyes shining with love. That was just the beginning of our story. And what a story it's turning out to be, he murmured before capturing her lips in a kiss that held all the promise of their shared future, a future born from a moment of fear, an act of courage, and the transformative power of love on a dusty Arizona afternoon. As their family grew over the years eventually, to include 3 children and countless friends who became like family, Emma and Quentin Xavier remained at the heart of Gila Bend's community. Their love story became part of the town's folklore, retold at gatherings and celebrations. The tale of a mail-order bride too afraid to leave the train, and the cowboy who climbed aboard and sat beside her, changing both their destinies forever. And on quiet evenings, long after their children were grown with families of their own, Emma and Quentin would still sit together on their porch, watching the desert sunset, their hands intertwined, 2 souls who found each other at precisely the moment they needed to most, proving that sometimes the greatest journeys begin not with a bold step forward, but with the courage to remain still long enough for love to find its way to you.